So good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you all. At the beginning, I'm on an Apple iPad, so the only way I can see the whole assembly is by swiping my screen, so it all goes by in kind of a blur. But it was good. I tried to see each of your faces, if only in passing. So when I was talking with Shinryu Sensei this morning about this afternoon's workshop, I said that I was very aware that we had people from widely differing backgrounds and practice, from people who have been studying Dogen for many years to people who have never encountered Dogen before and looked at the study text and said, what the? And I always try when I give a talk to think about, well, what do I want people to take away from this? And what came up for me was I would really like all of you, I'd like to share my love of Dogen and his teachings with you, and to let you know that no matter how esoteric or wild Dogen's very refined and poetic language might seem on first encounter, he's really talking about stuff that's very ordinary, very everyday, very familiar to each and every one of us. Why is that? Because he's talking about our practice. He's talking about our relationships. He's talking about loving and being loved. He's talking about our lives. But it's true, he's not always immediately accessible. And the study text that we're working with is certainly not one of his easier expressions of the Dharma. So I thought I would like to start out with just sort of a simple way of looking at what Dogen Zenji is talking about in his text, a painting of a rice cake. And it's very ready to hand in our Zoom world. So in our last, by the way, you might be hearing some construction noises from my buildings. I apologize in advance for that. Anyway, we began with a 30-minute sit with 30 minutes of zazen. And I always find it helpful in encountering Dogen to sort of refer what he's talking about back to my zazen practice. And, when I first started practicing zazen, I knew a whole lot more than I do now. I knew that, there was something I wanted to get from Zen practice. I wanted it to be enlightenment. And I knew that the means of doing that was to do zazen. So if I did a heck of a lot of zazen, sooner or later the bell would ring and I'd get enlightenment. And then at the time, my theory was, and then I'll get the hell out. But that wasn't the way things worked out for a very simple reason. If you've been doing zazen even for a few months, you very quickly learn that this question of the I who's supposed to get enlightened is extremely problematic. I mean, when I started, I had no doubt that this I was a little voice that was talking inside my skull. After doing my zazen, or even a short time, I noticed something really interesting. Hey, I'm not in control of that little voice. I can let a thought go, but the next second another thought pops up. The thoughts just keep gushing up like a fountain. So who is this I who is thinking? If it's who I think it is, why can't I just say, all right, shut up, and have everything be silent and peaceful? No, I can't control my thoughts any more than I can control the buzzsaw that I'm hearing through the wall at the moment, any more than I can control the sound of a bird flying by the window, any more than I can control the sun rising and setting. So this illusion that there's some I who's in control of everything and can get enlightened, that becomes very questionable very early on. So very early on, it becomes obvious that I don't really know whether I'm doing zazen or whether zazen is doing me. I certainly don't seem to be the one in the pilot seat. And when I sit with a group of people, everyone is experiencing the actualization of the truth in their zazen. And in our Zoom world, it's particularly obvious that even though we are Buddhas experiencing the actualization of the truth, the thoughts gushing up, whatever we're hearing, if there's a nice breeze on our face, we feel that. All of us are actualizing the truth in our zazen together, and yet each of us, none of us is having the same experience. None of us is having the same thoughts. In terms of the metaphor of Dogen's essay, all of us are being painted differently by our zazen, and we're painting zazen differently. And yet, in each moment, this painting and being painted is going on at the same time. So, are we the same, or are we different? Are we one, or are we many? We're actualizing all at the same time, actualizing the truth all at the same time, actualizing our lives all at the same time. And yet, each of us actualizes it our own way, under the causes and conditions of our own life, influenced by the joys and the heartbreaks that we've had individually in our own lives, and dealing with it, according to how long we've been practicing. But just because people have been practicing the same amount of time doesn't mean they practice in the same way. So this is very simply what Dogen is talking about all through this rather difficult essay. And the rice cake metaphor is a metaphor for that. And some of you who have been studying the essay will have noticed that rice cakes aren't the first thing that Dogen talks about. He talks about what I've just been pointing to right now. He says, all Buddhas are realization, and therefore all things are realization. And yet, no Buddhas and things are the same, are alike. none have the same mind. And yet, although there are no identical minds and things, when you actualize the reality of your life in this moment, numerous actualizations take place. And these actualizations do not hinder one another. So we're like this symphony, each of us playing our own peculiar instrument, and yet somehow the sum is greater than each of the parts. It's occurring all at once. It's arising in this moment all at once. He says, when you manifest, numerous manifestations are coming forth without touching each other. And then shortly thereafter, he cautions us not making sameness and difference, not making oneness and manyness the criteria of our practice, but simply to practice, knowing that we share the life of all beings. We share the life of mountains, rivers, and the great earth. And yet we actualize that life. We actualize our life force in ways that are peculiar to our karma, who and what we are, our hopes, fears, and dreams, our ambitions, our failures. So that's how Dogen starts out his essay. No mention of rice cakes, but pointing to this fact that the truth is always being actualized right here and right now. And we are all actualizing the truth right here and right now. And yet our actualizations don't interfere with each other, but they are not the same. So to make this point, to bring it home, Dogen comes to this metaphor of the rice cake. And he starts with a well-known saying in Zen, a painting of a rice cake does not satisfy hunger. This saying that Dogen picks up on and sort of turns inside out is, well known in Zen circles. It's also usually taken to mean, just reading about the Dharma, just reading sutras, all of that. That's not the real deal. That's just a painting of a rice cake. It isn't until you directly experience the Dharma for yourself that you get the real rice cake, the real nourishment. That's not the way Dogen sees things. He makes a very interesting move, though. He doesn't say, oh, no, you don't understand. It's very important to read the sutras, although he believes that. It's very important to study the expedient teachings, although he clearly believes that. What he does say is all rice cakes are painted rice cakes. All experience is painted experience. All enlightenment is painted enlightenment. All delusion is painted delusion. There is no way to separate enlightenment from the painting of enlightenment. No way to separate enlightenment from practice. he's that saying, the painting of a rice cake does not satisfy hunger, comes from a story about the great Zen master Kyogen Xiangyan. And I guess he lived in the 9th century in China, Tang Dynasty China. And he's a very familiar figure in Zen history. And that's the figure, he's an archetype, and it's the archetype of the whiz kid, the super great student, the one who's super smart, really intelligent, has a nearly photographic memory, and knows all the sutras backwards and forwards. Some of you will recall that Ananda, the third ancestor in India, also was one of these whiz kids. And traditionally, they're portrayed as having a very hard time in their practice. And one day, Kyogen's teacher said to him, "Look, you know, you're a bright kid. You keep coming in here, you quote the sutras, you understand them really well, but I need to see something of your own. I need you to show me your original face before your parents were born." And Kyogen sat with that question for weeks and weeks and months and months. And he looked through all his volumes of books, and he couldn't find a way to answer his teacher's question. And so he finally went to Isan, his teacher, and said, "Well, I'm stumped. Could you please explain this to me, teacher?" And then Isan said something very powerful. He said, "Yes, I could explain it to you, but that would only be my understanding, my experience, my Dharma. It would not be something of your own. And how could that possibly help you?" And so Kyogen became very discouraged. And that's when he said the famous saying, "The painting of a rice cake does not satisfy hunger," meaning all my book learning isn't doing me any good. And so he burned all his manuscripts and left the monastery and became a gravekeeper. He tended the grave of one of the former masters, the national master of China, about 100 years before Kyogen came along. And then one day, as he was sweeping the grave, a pebble flew from his broom and knocked into a pole of bamboo. Clack. And Kyogen finally realized it. What did he realize? He simply had the experience of being actualized by the bamboo and actualizing the bamboo, realizing himself as the life of bamboo, and realizing the life of bamboo as his own life. And he said, he burned incense, bowed in the direction of his teacher Isan, and says, "How compassionate you were not to explain anything to me." So what does this have to do with what Dogen Zenji is talking about? Why is it so important for each person to have their own awakening? It doesn't have to be an explosive experience. It simply has to be the experience of realizing one's own life, whether it feels like it or not, is the life of a Buddha. The unfolding of one's own life is the unfolding of the Dharma. And as your life unfolds, you unfold it. You are acted upon and you act. You are turned by the great Dharma wheel and you turn it. Or in Dogen's metaphor, you are painted by the Dharma world and you paint it. You are painted by the truth and you paint the truth. And none of us paints in the same way as anyone else. And I certainly hope you don't paint the way I do. We paint differently from each other. We have different capabilities, different ways of looking at things. And yet, as we're painting, we actualize the truth together. This is the very essence of Sangha, that although we are completely different in this moment, painting in our own way, we actualize the truth together. So that's a very nice thing to think about or to believe. And one could easily get the idea that, well, yeah, I'm always painting my life. So, I'm always painting enlightenment no matter what. So what's the big deal? Well, just painting any old way is not going to make a nourishing rice cake. Nourishing rice cakes that can sustain us and sustain others and sustain this broken world that we inhabit. Dogen Zenji says, rice cakes need to be painted with rice flour. Mountains are painted with rocks and crags and blues and reds. Rice cakes are painted with rice flour. Human beings, what do they paint with? Well, in traditional Buddhism, human beings paint with their 6 senses. Eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, as we say in the Heart Sutra. We paint with the paramitas. We paint with the Eightfold Path. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right meditation, right samadhi. All these are ways of painting our practice and being painted by our practice. It's just like when we do zazen, we are painted by our experience and we paint our experience. When we sit, we paint sitting. When the bell rings, we get up and we paint getting up. And that none of us gets up in the same way as any other person. Some of us sit in chairs, some on cushions, some on seiza benches, all actualizing the way in that moment as the people they are. Now, I suppose you could try to paint a rice cake, using mud as an ingredient. Yeah, mud's cool. I'm going to make a rice cake out of mud. Well, then you end up with a mud rice cake. If that's what you want to eat, more power to you. There are a lot of people out there actualizing their lives through making mud rice cakes, and much worse than mud rice cakes, and causing all sorts of suffering. So making a nourishing rice cake, painting is a matter of practice. In Buddhist practice, we make certain kinds of rice cakes according to the teachings. Those painted rice cakes of the teachings are actualized in our lives, actualized in our practice, actualized in the way we treat other people and receive their treatment of us, actualized in our way we are willing to learn, and by the way we are willing to share our learning with others. It's not a matter of, anything I do is a rice cake. Anything I do is painting. It's all a matter of context. If you're in the Buddhist world, then you have a certain intention in your practice. And yes, a lot of times we paint rice cakes that are not very flavorful or nourishing. We acknowledge that. We repent at the ceremony of Fusatsu, and we recommit ourselves to living our life with all beings and painting the most nourishing rice cakes that we possibly can. Now, Dogen says something that is kind of troubling, especially if we have the model of, we're going to practice and, everything's going to be great. Everything's going to be peaceful. We're going to be a kind, wonderful person. Other people will realize how kind and compassionate and wonderful we are, and they'll think we're great. And we'll get to that place where everything is just, everything is beautiful in its own way, as the old song goes. But Dogen says, a painted rice cake never satisfies hunger. Never satisfies hunger. That can be a very bleak statement unless you unpack it. It seems to say there's no hope. No hope. Painted rice cake does not satisfy hunger. Why bother painting at all? It's because we don't value hunger nearly enough. We came to practice because we were already painting our lives with hunger, a hunger for spiritual understanding, a hunger for a better understanding of this crazy thing we call life, a hunger for better relations with people, a hunger to be more loving and to be more loved in return. No hunger, no one's going to come into practice unless they have that hunger. And that hunger is not satisfied with any painted rice cake that you can imagine. One reason for this, and this has to do with Dogen's perspective on time, is that at the time hunger is satisfied with a painted rice cake, there is no hunger. Hunger is simply the history of the rice cake. But the future of the rice cake is continued hunger. The rice cake we paint just now is just the rice cake of this moment. Oh, wait, there's another rice cake to start painting. There's a dinner to be made. There's a dish to be washed. There's a pet to be fed. There's a child to be taken care of. So Dogen has a wonderful image for this. He says that hunger is a staff maneuvered vertically and horizontally. And if you think of a monk's staff, they're usually like, big hefty sticks, maybe 5 or 6 feet tall. And the monk takes them always on his or her pilgrimage over the mountains, across the rivers, over bridges, the hunger is always accompanying us. The hunger is simply the emptiness of our lives, the fact that nothing endures beyond even a nanosecond. So when this moment is actualized, made real, made true, made authentic, it's already past, and there's the next moment to actualize, and the next, and the next, and the next. And so, far from being a practice whereby we attain some steady state called enlightenment, where everything is just wonderful, we find that the perfect expression of our enlightenment is maneuvering our staff hunger over hill and down dale, through all the ups and downs of our lives, through frustration, through pandemics, through the loss of those we love, and of course, the joys, the birth of children, the flowers opening. All of these are the painting of our lives. They paint us as the rice cakes we are, and we paint them. Our lives, the technical term is interbeing. We are actualized by them, and we actualize them. So not only is this hunger never satisfied, it would be a real tragedy that we're ever satisfied. There'd be no more learning, no more growth, no more creation, no more effort to make the world a little more peaceful and less hopeless place. We have the ox herding pictures. Some of you are familiar with them. There are 10 pictures. The ox is supposedly, represents enlightenment, Buddha nature, and they depict our relationship with the ox, with enlightenment, with Buddha nature, 10 different stages. But for my money, and I think maybe for Dogen's too, the most important is the very first picture called Looking for the Ox, where the little man, he wants to find the ox, he has no idea where to find him. He looks here, he looks there. He's totally open, totally ready to learn and grow. And God help us if, as we find ourselves in any of the succeeding stages, if we lose that first stage, our practice is going to stagnate. We are going to stagnate as human beings. So we never want to lose our good companion, our hunger, our staff, our support through all the vicissitudes of life. So finally, how do we paint a nourishing rice cake? Well, we use the ingredients of our humanity. We use our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. We use the precepts. We use the teachings. We use our own impulses to kindliness, generosity, gentleness. Dogen, in another essay on prajna, on wisdom, defines prajna simply as that. There's eye, ears, nose, tongue, and mind prajna. There's 4 elements prajna: earth, air, fire, water, which in ancient times they believe that's what composed us. In other words, our bodies the elements of our bodies are this prajna we think we're seeking. That's right here. It's in our bones. It's in our heartbeat. It's in all the crazy thoughts that come up while we're doing zazen. We don't need to look far for how to paint a nourishing rice cake. We simply need to use the tools of our practice and our own best instincts. And when we do, more and more, we can paint a life of compassion and wisdom. And not paint it only as here I am, I'm painting a life of compassion and wisdom, but we can feel the compassion and wisdom of other people coming back at us, the compassion and wisdom of the Hudson River or whatever river happens to be near you as you're watching this, the compassion and wisdom of the sky, of birds, of cats and dogs and children. All of us are actualizing the truth together. All of us are Buddhas together. All of us are painted and painting rice cakes, actualizing the wholeness of body and mind. And yet, none of us is the same. None of us has the same mind. And yet our lives are completely interpenetrated, each with the other. Even in the time of Zoom and COVID, that teaching and practice are palpable. So I'd like to end my talk here. We'll take a 5-minute break to stretch, and then we'll come back for a mondo, which basically means you can ask me questions about something I've said. You can ask me questions about the study text, or you can simply share a response that comes from your heart. No need to ask a question about what's coming up for you. So I'll mute myself finally, and we'll take a 5-minute stretch break and come back for the mondo. So I would just like to throw things open now for the mondo.
Hi, Ryo. This is Ryotan. I'll ask a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you fine.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, thank you so much. That was just really helpful in understanding this text. As you said, I did find it to be a somewhat difficult text. And I think just your explanation helps with parts of it. So one phrase that I'm still just unclear about, this is in the section after the quote from Rujing, "A tall bamboo and a plantain enter a painting." And Dogen writes, "There is no muscle in the eye. There is no pigment in the paints. This is emancipation right here." And I'll just stop. I could go on, but the reference to muscle in the eye and pigment in the paints, this is emancipation right here, is still completely inscrutable to me.
Okay, well, I'll tell you how I interpret it. Let me start with the business about the plantain and the bamboo. So this was a side that I didn't get a chance to get to in my talk because, people can only stand so much. But basically, what I covered was what I think of as the verb side of painting a rice cake. And I think that's the major point, and that's the bulk of the essay. But there's also a noun side. So one of the reasons I like Kaz Tanahashi's translation is in English, painting works as both a verb and a noun. So the banana plant or the plantain and the bamboo are quite different from each other. And yet they actualize at this moment. In other words, they're part, or they are the same painting. Our minds make a distinction, but they're actualizing right here, right now, with all beings. Now the bamboo, as we know, we're familiar with bamboo, it's thin, it's tall. Traditionally, in Zen monasteries in Japan, they often have bamboo groves. It's not only aesthetically beautiful, but it's considered to protect the monastery. And the bamboo flowers once in 65 years, and then it dies. Banana plant is a whole different proposition. For one thing, what seems to be a trunk on a banana tree is not a trunk, it's a stem. The fruit is soft and squishy and very nourishing. And the banana plant is always in bloom. It's always bearing fruit. It's always nourishing. So here we have two very different kinds of beings, both actualized in the painting. If you think about how paintings were done back in the old days in China, they were done on scrolls. And so if you have, I don't know what the relative height of a banana plant and a bamboo is, but the scrolls would be at different sizes. They'd certainly be of different widths because a banana plant's going to it's hanging out there, and the bamboo is doing the bamboo thing, and yet they are both actualized in this moment. They're both actualized from a painting. Enlightenment and delusion are both actualized in this moment. They're both actualized from a painting, and whether enlightenment appears or delusion appears depends on what we're painting in this moment. Now, that's all a long way around to what you asked me, but the way I took his statement is ultimately we have to realize that this self that seems so real, the others that seem so real, the world that seems so real, they are not real in the sense that we think they are. Even though we paint mountains with red and blue pigments, and we paint rice cakes with rice flour, and enlightenment with enlightened action, and delusion with delusion action, ultimately the paints have no pigment. There's no one painting, and there's nothing being painted. And if you think this means, oh, well, then we're just out in outer space and nothing's going on, you're missing the point. But it's when we get this into our bones through our practice that we realize we are free to pick up the brush or not pick up the brush, that there is no self to protect, no others to be warded off. And this is liberation. The canvas is empty and open in every direction and is waiting for us to put a skillful drop of paint on it.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very helpful.
So is the word painting a way of pointing toward emptiness? Because I don't know why painting, why not building or making or even being, if you want the noun verb thing. But the paintingness of it, it feels like it's particular in a way I don't quite get.
Mhm.
Maybe
Yeah,
it's quite real.
that's a great question. And at least my view of the answer is that painting is just a metaphor that is particular to this essay. It's just a different way of saying what Dogen says in many of his essays using different metaphors. One I really like is the story in an essay called Point of Zazen, which has a great title since many of us wonder what the point of zazen is. He tells the story of Matsu and his teacher, Ananyue Weirong. And Matsu is a very dedicated student, sits up later than anybody else doing zazen constantly. And then one evening, Nanyue wanders into Matsu's room and says, "What are you doing?" And the bright young student goes, "Doing zazen." Nanyue goes, "Why are you doing zazen?" "To become a Buddha." And Nanyue picks up a tile and starts polishing it on his sleeve. And then Matsu asks, "What are you doing?" And Nanyue says, "I'm polishing a tile to make it into a mirror." And Matsu says, "How can you make a mirror by polishing a tile on your sleeve?" And his teacher says, "How can you make yourself a Buddha by doing zazen?" And Dogen's comment on this is, it is in the act of polishing that the mirror immediately appears. So in this essay, it's painting. In the essay I'm referring to, it's polishing. And Dogen says quite clearly, polishing is not the mirror. It's just that the mirror is not separate from polishing. It only appears in the midst of practice. These are all metaphors for practice. Painting, polishing. In a talk I gave a couple of weeks ago, it was dreaming. But all of these are ways of talking about practice, practice enlightenment. Without practice, enlightenment does not appear. So it's not, painting is only the metaphor du jour.
But
I can't hear you now, sorry.
one muted me. So, but polishing and painting both have to do with how you see things. Is that what's important about the metaphor?
Yeah, I think, you know, the two metaphors emphasize different things. To me, painting emphasizes living creatively. I don't think Dogen would say painting depends on how you see things. He would say you see things as you're painting. In other words, painting doesn't so much come out of vision, although he would say, you know, it starts with vision, or it starts with hunger for vision. And as you paint, you realize your vision, and the vision you realize today will not be the vision you realize tomorrow, but you keep painting and you keep practicing. Polishing is a little different kind of metaphor, and to me it evokes more like monastic practice. You know, make sure your cushion is clean, make sure you bow when you're supposed to bow, come on time, and you say you're continually polishing, you know, your behavior. And in that, you enlighten yourself and others through the action of polishing. And of course, polishing is not going to be the same in a medieval Zen monastery as it is as a lay practitioner today. So the creativity is still there. We still need to find out what polishing is for us in this time and place.
The beautiful image jumped out at me. Those in cloud robes and mist sleeves who study this statement, as well as bodhisattvas and shravakas who come from the 10 directions, differ in name and position. And I just thought it was a beautiful image. And then later in the text, Dogen refers to his teacher, Rujin, saying, attaining the way, 1,000 snowflakes disappear, painting green mountains, several scrolls appear. And I was also taken by that image too, but I didn't see them as related until just as Yuko was talking, because a few weeks ago, Professor Fulk was giving a talk about this and he had a different translation. So I took a look at it there while she was talking. And would you believe that, anyway, to cut a long story short, those who wear the robes of the mountains and the robes of the mists, that refers to monks wandering among the landscape. And then his interpretation of Wu Jing's comment is, sorry, I hear my voice coming back, and that's why I'm looking disconcerted.
Yes, it's a little hard to understand you, but
Zoom
so
syndrome. Wu Jing says something to the effect of, when the painting is done, blue mountains appear and multiple scrolls are manifested, something to that effect. And that is in reference to painting, Chinese painting. So in other words, the landscape itself, I think, is a poetic image that Dogen is suggesting. The landscape itself is the wandering monk. I don't know, that just jumped out at me, like the painting kind of thing going on there. But so that's why I raised my hand and then put it down, Hugo, because I wasn't sure if it was a question or a statement. So
yeah, I'm not sure whether.
Okay, so
but it sounds like something that's coming up for you.
Yeah. And also, I was just one last thing is that when you said that everybody's rice cake of realization is different, is unique, is something that I think I needed to hear again. Well, I will need to hear again, I'm sure. Thank you.
I want to thank you, first of all, for the beautiful talk. It was just very moving. I have a question about real, the word real, the concept real, and it's on page 5. I think it's about the 3rd paragraph where it says the 10 names and 3 miraculous powers are a painting on a scroll. The roots, capacities, awakenings, and the noble path are also a painting on a scroll. If you say a painting is not real, then the myriad things are not real. If the myriad things are not real, then Buddha Dharma is not real. As Buddha Dharma is real, a painted rice cake is real. The sense that real, the sense of real.
Is that your comment?
I'd like to hear from you how you interpret real, because I've always sort of understood that in a way things are not real, but in a way they're very real.
Yeah, that actually, that passage struck me as well for the use of the word real. And so you might know this, in Buddhism, we talk about the middle way. And that has a lot of interpretations, but one of them is Buddhism denies both realism and nihilism. In other words, it makes no comment about whether things are real or unreal. So it's different from, you know, philosophies that.
Okay, right. But in this,
So in
in
terms,
this, sorry,
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, not in a philosophical sense, but the sense of being experienced. That's how I'm understanding that paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
That the actualization is a more intense, or it's a deeper experience which people can tell, people can feel it, and feel when it's there in somebody else. And it has a kind of effect, I think, of it's almost like it's contagious. It opens something up. So it's in terms of it being experienced rather than up there a thought. I can understand the use of real. Do you agree with that?
I don't disagree with it. I would simply say that I felt as you were speaking, I could feel the actualization of the Buddha Dharma right in that moment, and whether it was real or unreal, that's none of this to me. It was complete manifestation, complete actualization. It was a rice cake. And of course, now we're moving on because we're still painting hunger, and we want to see into this even more deeply.
Thank you.
So lately I feel as if I'm starving and I cannot stand the taste. So what would you say I might do? Because I'm feeling trapped.
Mm-hmm. So what is that feeling like? How is it coming up for you?
It comes up in many different ways. Wanting to run, wanting to hide, and also diving right into what I'm horrified by. I know others that I'm not even thinking of or aware of.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're going through a rough time, and there are some rough ingredients in the rice cake that you're painting, and yet I also am aware that you've been contributing enormously to our online retreat, and in fact, you're going to be our technical host next week on Saturday. And these are also ingredients in the rice cake that you're painting. So, you know, the rice cake has many ingredients, but our practice is to paint with the ingredients to hand and try to make as nourishing a meal as we can for ourselves and others.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll take a look at the recipe and see what I can.
Well, I know you did the King Arthur flour course. So,
yeah, well, it's not covering over the taste right now, but I'll keep looking for something to throw in there.
I have no doubt that we'll be the ones who benefit from your practice. Okay, thank you all for participating in the Mondo. We're going to take another 5-minute break, and then we're going to do a 15-minute writing assignment. We're back and we're ready for the writing assignment that we will use in our group sharing. So here are the guidelines for doing the assignment. I'll give you two questions to be considered when you're writing. Then when I've given you the questions, we'll do zazen together for 2 minutes and just sort of sit with those questions for 2 minutes before you start your writing. There won't be any bells. You intuitively will know when 2 minutes have passed. And then when you write your answers to the questions, don't make it kind of automatic writing. Just whatever is sort of gushing up for you, allow your hand just to write freely. You're not going to be reading anything you write unless you choose to do so. So it should really be free association, and it's for your benefit and your experience, not necessarily for presentation unless you want it to be. So after we finish doing our 2 minutes of zazen, there'll be 15 minutes to write. And I guess I will say start writing, just so we're all beginning at the same time. And after 15 minutes, we'll reconvene. You can either write in front of the camera with other people or off on your own as you like. But after 15 minutes, we'll come back together and we'll just share what the experience was like for us. If you want to read something that came up, fine. If not, just share what's coming up from your heart as a result of doing the exercise. Okay, so here are the two questions I want you to consider. How are you being painted right now, in this time, in this place? That's the first question. And the second question is, how are you painting your life with all beings as the person you are in this place, in these times? All right, so we'll do 2 minutes of zazen. At the end of 2 minutes, I'll bow and say, please begin writing. And we'll do the automatic writing for 15 minutes. Okay, so now we've come to a place where we get a chance to share with each other about our experience with the writing assignment, anything that came up for us. For the sharing portion of the afternoon, I'd say we have, maybe about 40 minutes. So we ask that you keep your shares brief, maybe 2 minutes at the most. And Shugo has kindly agreed to remind us with a gong if we're running on past our 2 minutes. So the form for this is to sit in zazen. Your eyes can be open and facing the computer. And then if you're moved to speak, bow, unmute yourself, say your name, share, and then when you finish speaking, bow and mute yourself again. And this will be what we call popcorn style or Quaker meeting style. So anyone who's moved to speak can. If two people start speaking at the same time, I know that you'll be courteous and get that figured out. and so that everyone has a chance to share who would like to. So with that, I'm going to mute myself and invite anyone who would like to unmute and speak.
Sari, hi.
Go ahead, Serio. I'll go after you.
Okay. Nice to see you, Yugetsu.
Same here.
This is Seiru. Ryotan, thank you so much for this really what seemingly simple exercise, but kind of seems endlessly giving. The very first sentence I wrote, I started with the being painted, and I wrote, I am being painted into a corner by people who won't wear masks, by a government that won't lead people into a culture of caring for others, and by an economy that can't handle resting. And I don't know why complaining was the place to start, but it often is. But then it immediately turned into gratefulness. I am being painted by Cosm driving 30 minutes to the mochi bakery for me, even when we've just had a big fight, and so on and so on. And then when I switched to painting the world, interestingly, I started a new paragraph, which seems like an interesting kind of knee-jerk separation of the two. But it was all about moving forward into life and doing things, and mostly doing kind of like good things. But then halfway through that paragraph, it turned into, so it was things like I care for the spaces I inhabit, I clean them, etc. But then it turned into I paint my life when I allow others to influence it in unexpected ways. I paint my life when I let it be porous, etc. And it turned into a kind of an interesting moving forward into my life, not by doing things, but by opening up to letting life again kind of paint me. And by the end, I ended up with, I paint my life when I let life paint me. I paint my life painting me. I am painted by life being painted by me. And it's ended up as this whole big mishmash. So thank you for this exercise.
I'm Yugetsu, by the way, and I'm in part being painted by my impatience, desire to just get this out so I can really sit back and savor everything. But I'm being painted by ingredients left behind. I listened to Shinryu's talk this morning, and it's really influenced that I am really grateful for this computer that's running Zoom, that is giving me the chance to be with you and hear such an amazing Dharma talk, and to I'm also a college professor, so I use Zoom. I used it a lot, and I really appreciate how much it does let us work with. So there's some gratitude in that painting. It's also, I'm being painted, the other side of that gratitude is I'm being painted by some fear that I'm being forced to go back and teach in person in the fall, by a university that tells me it's going to provide resources for protection when they've never provided anything. You know, it's hard to find a piece of chalk. So, you know, the idea that I'm going to be protected is not reassuring. So I'm being painted by this tension between fear of that and just meeting the moment right now with all of you and letting that open up. And it's teaching me more patience, which is always a good thing. And You know, the other thing I'll just say is everything I'm doing right now is about trying to paint a rice cake. I'm a filmmaker, so I'm trying to paint a rice cake wherein others may see traces of their own ingredients. So that is, I think, maybe a presumptuous, but you know, it's like the noble endeavor. Why did Dogen write this piece, this fascicle, and just keep us going round and round and round and round every aspect of it, almost like a sculpture? I think, you know, there's this desire to sort of open up lanes of ingredients.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jifu, and there was something in the fascicle. Emancipation is not a matter of time, and it's not concerned with discussion of a certain moment. And then I also have a long stick, a very long one. It's about 6 feet long, and I use it. And when I go in the park in the morning and I have it with me, or in the evening, I like to use it in the evening. I find myself just being there, taking this movement and painting through the air with what in the old days would have been a long bamboo stick, but is kind of a heavy hardwood stick these days. And I can use it as a walking stick. And it's 6 feet long, which makes it perfect for social and physical distancing. And when I have it with me, believe me, and I'm using it, no one is going to even come near me. So with mask on and my straw hat, because of the heat from the sun, I feel like I'm some sort of ancient heroine or something sometimes. So it's really about the 4 and 5 elements, depending on how you look at it. And that's the vital energy. And that's where I'm at with it when I'm in those moments. And I can take that with me all of the time. And so just that little part of the fascicle really spoke to me. I feel that we all want to get somewhere, somehow, some way. And there's no real recipe for that. But when I have my stick, I feel like, you know, this is part of my life. And it translates to all other actions, and that's a rice cake for those moments. Thank you all for your help.
Hi everyone, Musho here. I wrote, there's an AC unit in this room. This is my little office, and it's cooling my legs and my feet, but the upper portion of the room is filled with warm air. So my neck and my head are being painted by heat, and then my legs and my feet are being painted by a cold air conditioning air. And so then I was thinking, I'm hungry for even cooling. I wrote that. Then I thought about right now, maybe you know I have an art exhibit going on, and people could possibly be there, and those people would be painting my life, like painting their idea of who I am, and then I would understand that and paint something about myself from their ideas of what I am. That's kind of cool. I also realized it was hard for me to write about what I'm painting than being painted, because being painted is somehow slightly more passive, seems to me. But when I'm going back to Dogen, I realized that even this morning I cut the grass in our little backyard. That was painting my life. And I've been cleaning up my studio since my show is done, or my show is up. and making, getting ready to make some new works. And I'm painting my life in that way. My Zen practice, being with you and sitting together in the morning, is also painting my life. And of course, hearing the talks and being with you all is my life being painted. So thank you.
So it's pre-dawn here, and I have been consumed with writing, fire writing, drought writing, and today, this morning, pre-dawn, rain writing. My practice is great gratitude. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Fusho. I'm gonna jump in. I loved, I started with how I'm being painted by the coronavirus and having to be here, home, and all those frustrations, and then experienced and then thought about what I am doing, and then had the surprise of the understanding of what I am doing and how. When people respond to that, then I respond without thinking about it, and that it goes on and on together in both ways, painting and being painted simultaneously and moment by moment. So it was a very nice writing experience for me to see how they actualize, and how being painted and painting is what we're doing all the time.
I find that while I'm distraught and afraid of the reality of the illness affecting so many, many mortally, I'm in some sense appreciative of certain aspects of the shutdown and the shift away from business and busyness as usual. And it's my probably overly optimistic hope that it would lead to changes in business and busyness as usual. And the way that I'm painting my life, it is much more circumscribed than ever. I can't go out freely, see friends and relations face to face. I keep in touch by phone, and I carry on the things that I can: violin lessons, trio practice. I enjoy accessibility to meditating with the Zendo very much. I really appreciate that we can practice together and with such a large and worldwide diverse group of people. Thank you.
Painting is sort of all the things I feel in control of. I don't know what to say. You know, it's sort of like I just wrote and then I looked at it and that's what's there. It's like, oh, I can control this, I can control that, I can control this, I'm painting, you know, so that's all I got to say. Thank you. I forgot to bow.
Good.
My name is Cezanne, and I feel that I am painted by the feelings and experiences that I share deeply. And what is being painted is the reflection of how people see me. I feel that the image that I have of that is that a washcloth being wrung out, washed and washing and wringing it out and wringing it out and rinsing it out. I feel that I'm painting my life by writing out the feelings and experiences that I'm going through with disappearing ink. As long as it's wet, I can read it, or somebody close to me can read it. But when it dries, it evaporates and is no longer there. And the person that wrote it is no longer there either. I'm a different person at that point.
So I think for me, I feel that my grief, my personal grief, and my grief about the world, it just feels so deep. And I just feel so hungry, like hungry to alleviate it. And I have all these feelings all day long, like if only I had a real funeral and not a Zoom funeral, or a real 49-day ceremony instead of the Zoom one, or a real Shiva, or real people meeting me, or then I would be not this hungry. That's what I feel. And then in the part that writing about how I'm painting the world is, I'm telling myself that the state of the world is keeping me from my grief, from my experience. In fact, what is it that I'm seeking? You know, I think I had all kinds of reactions to Griff's talk, but in his interpretation, there isn't any difference between the painted and the real. Both don't alleviate hunger, maybe both alleviate hunger in the same way. What is the normal, or back to normal, that everyone is talking about? Is our state now not normal? This is the new normal, I want to shout. Get used to it. The Buddha turns the Dharma wheel, and so reality is shown in all its many forms. So if I'm reaching one thing, as it says in this text, I'm reaching myriad of things. And there's really not one way for me to experience my grief. And there isn't one better solution to satiate what I'm feeling.
I'm Gesho. I guess I felt as soon as the question was posed that intuitively the two things are really one thing, although they can feel separate to me. But what came to mind, some of you were in the watercolor workshop over the last couple of days, and I had this image of when the brush meets the paper. Is it the paper? Is it the brush? Is it, you know, where is the painting happening? You can't really separate that. You can't really say that the paper isn't, in some sense, doing the painting, because everything that happens relies on it utterly. And some of my favorite stuff that we did was put water onto the paper and then paint into that water. And the pigment would move with the water in these very beautiful and surprising ways. And sometimes we were bringing more than one color together. And the way that the pigments were, especially if there was a lot of water, was that you could actually see the tiny particles of pigment separate and travel and meet each other and not really mingle, like the yellow and the blue didn't actually turn into green particles. They stayed as yellow and blue particles. So that's what came to my mind. Thank you.
I started with the question of how I'm being painted. And I wrote that I'm being painted in a way I could never paint myself. And for the other question, how are you painting your life? I think, well, I wrote, the more I try to make a perfect painting, the more I get into a messed up painting. Thank you.
So I realize that I'm continually being painted in all my interactions, but at the same time, I feel that there's an ongoing painting of me from when I was a child, and I can't let go of that painting. I'm going to read it. I'm in a crib, allowed to handle nothing, allowed to touch nothing, for fear that I may break something or something may break me. This painting of me is a continuing watercolor going on and on, Groundhog Day forever. Yet at the same time, I realize I can paint. There are watercolors. I am large, I contain multitudes. Thanks, Whitman. I discover writing. I discover basketball. I discover love. But still, there's that experience as a child that's always there. I'm always being painted by my history. And then I find a freedom of getting the COVID and being sick. And then I know there's no necessary immunity, but there's a freedom of having been sick that a worry goes away, even though I observe everything I'm supposed to do. There's a freedom from having been sick and having recovered. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Huetsu. I'll be very brief. What arose immediately for me was a poem, and I'm no poet, so please forgive me, but I'll share it with you. In stillness, paints well to the surface, a rainbow of colors, a universe in time, swirling, merging, separating, reconnecting, actualizing practice, practicing actualization. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jisei. After I kind of wrote, looking at both questions, I definitely felt that there was no difference between being painted or painting. Everything that was happening was informing each other. What initially came up was that I feel like I'm on sort of a never-ending retreat. It just feels so intense and kind of unrelenting, not having sort of my normal distractions or as much work as I normally do. So no way to distract myself from kind of actively practicing. So what that enables is to just really be in touch with what's happening in my body, what's happening in my life, right thoughts and feelings, so I guess it's the whole mix of really trying to be with whatever is coming up and doing my best, and that involves sometimes a lot of pain and feeling as if even stepping into new things, as if I'm dying, trying new behaviors or what feels would be a more compassionate, appropriate behavior can be hard, and also all the joys and pleasures that are also there, particularly where I live, which is in a beautiful rural area. So I don't know, no difference. Everything is working this way and that way. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Kozan. I started answering first question and then the second question, and then it happened to me the same, that sameness and difference came to my mind, like I was writing, and then I felt that both are the same and they are different at the same time, because both are happening at the same time for me. When I don't realize all the time about this, but when I am conscious, I'm aware of this, I feel a lot of power, I feel connection, I feel I'm flowing with everything that's happening to me and around me. And I feel a lot of motivation to transform my life and also to help transform other people's lives. So it's like a dialogue happening all the time. So for me, like the challenge is to become more aware of this all the time. So thank you very much.
A couple of things came to mind. The first one being a very famous etching by M.C. Escher of one hand drawing another, which is drawing it. It also struck me as I was listening to some of the comments, we're not very comfortable with being painted because we feel it's passive. I certainly know that feeling in myself, but this business of being painted is like what we say in the meal blessing. Thousands of lives gave their labors so we can exist. And this kind of painting each other is how ecosystems function. They co-evolve. There have been many instances like flowering plants and insects evolved at the same time, historically or prehistorically. But the one thing I really wanted to share actually happened while we were having these, having different people say something. And Joan was having a little trouble with her sound. And from 2 screens over, Bob leaned over and I could see his head in her picture, and then everything was all right. And as he went back to his frame, like one of the people in Harry Potter, there was a picture on the wall behind him that was also behind Joan. So I could deduce that they were sitting side by side, but in different frames. If that isn't a metaphor for something, I'm not sure what it is. Thank you.
Yes, okay, thank you. I'm so sorry I do not have my screen on, but thank you so much. I am bowing, thank you all. So I just wanted to read a few lines that I wrote here. So the first line I wrote was, I'm being painted by how society wants me to be painted. When I was born, I was already in a painting. A few lines further down, I say, as of right now, I'm still in this painting that was created or painted for me. A few lines more, I say the audience will paint me or see me as whatever rice cake they are painting. The audience are all the painters who have molded me. They have imposed their beliefs, their opinions, their life onto mine. I end with, sometimes I paint, and before I realize it, I'm painting myself into my previous painting. And I become aware of it, and I start to paint how I want my life to be. I start painting my life based on my hunger, and my hunger paints my life. My hunger is my painting. My hunger is my color. My hunger and colors are also yours. And I hope that in mine, you will find joy, love, acceptance, and growth. I know there are many rice cakes to eat because they're already painted, even though we don't know they are. The excitement is the painting that has yet to be done, the hunger that has yet to come, and how would I continue to paint my life? Thank you all.
I have to say, I really, felt as soon as I heard the 2 questions, as did Gesho and Jisei, it's one question, it's one statement. You know, how we paint, how we create and see what's around us, affecting us, and how, the illusions we have to how we affect the world is really what came to mind. I was watching this morning something that I've been trying to avoid. I watched what was going on in Portland, and it was a reporter talking about, showing some images and talking about what's going on there. And I knew my blood was going to boil because, I'm very involved. But I realized that this guy is telling a story, and these are all these images strung together. So I am painting a picture that somebody else is painting, and it becomes very convoluted. Also, I was thinking about my situation here, dealing with health issues, and how I see the world now as a result of that. And my vulnerability as a result, and my invincibility of my youth is gone. Anyway, some thoughts.
I'm Jigan, and I assume you can all hear me. For me, it was, I thought of, well, it's like the difference between being acted on and then what you do with it for me. And just at the end, I thought of that Bugs Bunny episode where he suddenly realizes he's being drawn. And it's like a magical moment where he can, it's like, oh, and something clicks. And I guess for me, the struggle is, it's like, oh, that canvas is always there. And you just keep remembering that that canvas is always there.
My name's Anita, but it's also Kozan, another Kozan. I wrote a bunch of stuff, and it was only after hearing all of you that I realized that immediately when I went into stay-at-home shelter mode 4 months ago, I didn't realize until now that I completely surrendered to it. And COVID made me surrender. And I'm not a surrenderer usually. And it turns out surrender is exactly where I should be. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm bowing. My video malfunctioned. Thank you so much. I almost didn't share because for fear. I wrote a lot, but in the end, I said that I was painting myself to be free to be painted. Thank you.
My name is Shugo, and yesterday I went for a walk with a friend of mine I've been friends with for 20 years, and as our friendship has grown and changed, we've always stayed really close, but sometimes I've worried that, you know, as we got older and different things developed, that we wouldn't have the depth in the way that I really wanted it. And I would have to accept that we're great friends and so close, but it wouldn't always have a particular kind of depth that I'm looking for. And that's okay. But yesterday we had this conversation and we sat in a park and I shared something and he shared something and it just kind of bounced back and forth. And I felt us going deeper in a relationship that's already incredibly deep. And it kept deepening and we started to share some things that we kind of shared a little bit before, but we shared even more. And connecting the dots between family experiences and work and our partners. And I felt that I was painting the deepening of this relationship while I was also being painted by what he was sharing that was deepening it for me as well. And I came home and on top of, you know, my love for him, my gratitude for that relationship, I just felt amazed that like, so it just happened in just, there it is, the deepening of our relationship once again. And just been thinking about that.
So thank you, Shugo, and thank you all. It was great to hear from you. Also great to see some faces on my screen that I haven't seen for a long time. So thanks to the lockdown, I'm able to look into your face once again, if only virtually. So I said at the beginning that I was hoping what people would get would be that forbidding as Dogen can be sometime, really engaging with his teachings can really open us up. And as many people have implied in their share, by being intimate with Dogen Zenshi, we're also being intimate with each other. By being painted by his teaching, we're also painting him and each other. So as Roshi said in her initial talk, understanding the exact words is not so important as making a sincere attempt to be intimate with what's coming through from his teaching and from our teaching of each other. So thank you for sharing this time with me and with each other. And Shugo, if you would lead us in the 4 vows, we can finish up. And then after the 4 vows, we can all unmute for a couple of minutes. And
Ryo, I'd also like to say a word.
Of course, I'm sorry.
I was thinking about when I started doing retreats with Village Zendo, and one of the things that I found eye-opening was the way we work with study texts, which we've always done, but the way of doing it, which I think came from Ryotan Roshi, but it's also, I think, very much what Enkyo Roshi's teaching is all about, is that it's not about grasping the study text intellectually or academically, it's finding its meaning in our own lives. And I felt like Ryo's talk today really helped us to do that. And all of your questions and comments really helped us to do that. So I had this sense that what we were doing this afternoon was really painting Dogen, painting on a rice cake. And I hope that you'll continue to keep the text close to you this week, because next week we'll continue. I think there's a lot more to unfold in it. So hope you can make it back next Saturday. And in the meantime, I hope you can continue to see how the text is manifesting or reflecting in your life and how you're reflecting it.
Sentient
beings
numberless, I
come to save them.
Deep
are
inexhaustible, I vow to put an end to them. The Dharmas are boundless. I vow to master them. The Buddha way is unattainable. I vow to attain